For those again who don't know me, my name is Dr. Iuliia Hoban. I am assistant professor at our Department of Emergency, Disaster, and Global Security Studies, and I also lead our program on master's program on human security and resilience. So today we are in the month 4 of the EM series. So welcome to those who joined us before, and if it's first time for you all, also welcome. And this session's topic, I think it's very timely and on everyone's radar, yes, and how we use tools, emerging technologies, digital tools in emergency management. And our speaker today is Joe Hills. So I will take a moment to introduce Joe to you all, and then I'll open the floor to his presentation. But please feel free to add in the chat where you're joining us from, if you are a student, faculty, and as you listen to the presentation, add the questions in the chat and we get to them once the presentation is over. So we're really excited to have Joe Hills joining us. Uh, he is the director of the Information Technology Disaster Resource Center and also done more than 20 years of experience in emergency management and public safety, and has also served as advisor to FEMA on various initiatives. Um, Joe holds a number of industry credentials, which combined with with his disaster response, gives him what he calls a 360-degree view of disaster technology. So, welcome, Joe, and please feel free to add if I missed anything. And I look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. And good afternoon. I'm assuming everybody's in the afternoon, but my name is Joe Hillis. I am the operations director for the Information Technology Disaster Resource Center. ITDRC is a volunteer-driven organization. I'm going to pull my slides up really quick and hopefully get those shared for you. I will probably go off camera so you don't have to, so I don't become a distraction for you. So hopefully that you've got a good, give me a thumbs up. You got the slides? Okay, perfect. Um, okay, so I realize today we want to talk a little bit about, how technology impacts emergency management and how it's used for both disaster response and relief. To me, ITDRC, we in this unique niche role around physical response, right? There's a lot of things that the tools can do for you that you could do from behind your desk, that people could do remotely from across any part of the world. But at the core of everything, right, is connectivity. Often disasters, destroy communications infrastructure, power infrastructure, things like that. It makes it very difficult to get things like ground truth, to do coordination, command control, all those things. So really, that's really where ITDRC sits, is that, in the physical layer, if you will, of disaster response. So basically, we're an 18-year-old organization based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas. And so we, as an organization, we're just a vendor neutral clearinghouse for ICT, information communications and technology resources that benefit the whole community. So here we have only one, you cannot buy anything from our organization. It just in order to get an allocation of our resources, they must benefit the whole community. So I love to say, if Betty's Hair Salon says I need an internet connection, the answer is probably no. But if Betty's Hair Salon happens to have 40 pallets of water and is cooking 3 meals a day for her entire neighborhood after a hurricane, Betty can have anything that we have, right? So we keep one leg in the emergency management space. We keep the other leg really in the technology space. So we're merely a vehicle for uh, technology volunteers, for technology companies to use their people, products, and dollars for good to help communities in a meaningful way after a disaster. So a relatively not super new map. The green dots, and this is publicly available on our website. These are areas that we have open sites as of today. So for the most part, when we go into a community after a disaster and we establish a site, whether it's a temporary command center, whether it's a long-term recovery center, whatever that is, we don't necessarily go away when the TV cameras leave. So a lot of these are actually post-COVID sites, where we, put in public connectivity outside of, schools and community centers and things like that, where the students could get connected to go. So remember, COVID was a federally declared disaster in the United States. It wasn't the typical smoking hole in the ground. And that's one of the things that I want you guys to take away from this, is that all disasters are not necessarily going to be physical disasters, right? You can have virtual disasters, things like COVID, things like ransomware, a cyber response, that could take out our power grids, take out our water systems and things like that. Not necessarily a smoking hole in the ground. So one of the other lessons for you to learn is that, certainly in the U.S. there is, disasters aren't free. There is typically a deductible, for lack of better words, right? So generally, if you get a federal disaster declaration, the local jurisdiction is going to be on the hook to pay for 10 to 25% of that disaster. Now, it's not like tuition where you just go, pay your down payment and do your thing. What happens is they run the disaster, and then FEMA comes in after the disaster and said, okay, how much money was spent? And once they agree on how much money was spent, then FEMA's got their hand out and says, well, you owe us 10%. So, or 25% or whatever that is. And in some cases, it's 0%. In some cases, it's a 100% covered disaster and there is no deductible. But the point being is, um, any volunteers or donations that come into a community after a disaster, those actually count towards that community's match. So for every pallet of water, it has a value. For every case of diapers that's donated, it has a value. For every volunteer hour that's donated, again, there's a value to that community. So it's not just about doing good, if you will. The fair market value actually really make a meaningful difference to the communities that we're helping. So we have also a little bit of an international footprint. Certainly last year, the major hurricane happened to be, in the Caribbean and impacting Jamaica, which is where we spent, several months after that, and still, continue to support them through recovery. So as an organization, our priorities are what yours should be, right? Which is life safety is the number one priority. We bucket that as like police, fire, EMS, emergency management, hospital emergency rooms, completely different than chiropractors' offices or, whatever, right? So it is a life safety thing. They get the first cut at our resources. So if we get, and sometimes we get dozens of requests at a time concurrently, we use this matrix to help us, decide, if you will, who gets the first, second cuts of our resources. So our second focus is mass care, feeding, sheltering, reunification, medical facilities, community recovery. That's the short-term recovery, right? That's that period where you're making sure that everybody that was impacted by the disaster has a roof over their head and has a meal in their belly. It's not necessarily their long-term strategy. This isn't their house rebuilt. This is everybody has a place to go and stay for safety and security. And then finally, long-term recovery. And long-term recovery can last for a decade, even more in some, regions of the world. So ITDRC functions across all of these in that list of priorities. So a little bit about the organization. We have, thousands of technical volunteers, globally. The majority of our folks are based in the United States, others across North America, others in other countries. We as an organization have always focused on the United States, and then we have built our footprint out across North America now. We keep resources, both fleet assets and equipment caches in all 10 FEMA regions, right? That includes, Puerto Rico, that includes Hawaii, Alaska. So we have equipment there. Our goal is, and I have a slide later on to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like, but Our goal is to cut the time to response because we're based in centrally in the United States, but the South Central, right? It's a 3 day drive for us to get to Seattle. It's a 3 day drive for us to get to New York City if we're bringing our big mobile response equipment that far. So, consequently, we have assets staged elsewhere. We have a dedicated emergency communications support team, right? These are the people that, the ComEls, the ComTs, the ITSLs, the, RADOs. They're, again, volunteers in our organization that, have that specialty. A lot of cases, they have work in emergency management or work for a city or a county in their day jobs. They volunteer through ITDRC to either get additional experience or to get opportunities to go other places that they wouldn't normally get to go. Same with the critical information system team, right? These people have on that team, they have an FBI public trust background check as part of the InfraGard program, if you're familiar with that, which is a program of the FBI. And so it gives our stakeholders some degree of confidence that the person who is inside of their police station or their courthouse or whatever that is, has this public trust background check. Same with our cyber response support team. Cyber is an increasing issue. Again, it is a disaster that can take that impacts so much critical infrastructure in so many different ways. And then finally, we have our Tech Task Force Partner Program. It's where a lot of the most recognizable names, I always hate listing them, but it's the Microsofts, it's the Googles, it's the Facebooks, it's the Ciscos, it's the HPs, it's the whomever. Where again they partner with us, their employee volunteers come out and deploy into a community afterwards, and they're able to do their magic. So survivor support, some of the services we offer, right? In shelters, we do Wi-Fi connectivity, cell phone charging stations, right? Cell phone charging stations weren't an issue when we first started when I first started doing this, but they have been. We all live and die by that little device in our hands right now. So again, we have replacement telephones, and sometimes they're cellular phones, sometimes they're desk phones. It just depends on what the event is, where it is, and what the need is. If everybody had time, if there was a hurricane coming and it took them 2 or 3 days to pack and they had 2 or 3 days notice to pack and leave, chances are they showed up at the shelter with everything they needed. But when it's a fast moving wildfire, people leave with just a device in their hand oftentimes. So they do need that charging. They do need the connectivity. Video programming, right? We push, direct TV or dish TV, right? We put that in the shelters, keep the kids occupied while they're in a shelter. If you've never been into a shelter, I encourage you as part of your role in emergency management to experience that because it's not a great happy place, right? I mean, these people are all displaced, they're all worried, all the things that happen there. So anything that can be done to make their life easier for that period of time of displacement, that's on you. That's on you as the emergency manager. And internet cafes and things like that. We also support a lot of the nonprofits, a lot of the big major nonprofits, because our goal as an organization is to provide the technical resources. I don't necessarily want Habitat for Humanity buying thousands of dollars worth of computers, right? I want them buying sheetrock and roofing shingles and drywall and paint and all the things that they can do to help make survivors whole. So consequently, we do a lot of that. We support those nonprofits in their work through our technology pieces. So, but we do support things like Marks, a multi-agency recovery center. I think in California they call them community, maybe it's community recovery centers. I'm not sure, but distribution points of distribution, donations warehouses, those types of things that all get stood up after a disaster. And again, typically with no infrastructure, but those are the types of things that we do as an organization. We do a lot of work, supporting the government and certainly on responses. This particular picture this is our mobile command center, which was deployed during the mass vaccination time back in Dallas, Texas, right? They had thousands of people coming in every day for vaccinations, whole incident management team, and it was in the middle of a parking lot, a fairgrounds parking lot, right? So you never know where you're going to need to set up an emergency command center or an operations center, command post, whatever that is. Again, these are all things that people look to ITDRC to solve. Emergency services, same thing, right? I mean, we do everything from, providing, internet connectivity and fire camps or command centers, those types of things. But again, network infrastructure is not something that they typically have, and there's things they often need. Call centers. I mean, think about that. People are wanting to get in touch with social services, just like a 211 kind of thing. Again, the AmeriCorps people may come in and do assessments, talk to the survivor families afterwards, find out the types of things they need. So we provide those types of tools for them. I'm not going to read every one of these because I'm sure you guys all have somewhere else to be this afternoon. So there's a lot of slides. It started off with just a few slides in all fairness. And then they asked me to take the whole session. So I went and grabbed the biggest slide deck I could find. And I thought, well, if I don't put you to sleep with this, you just can't go to sleep today. So community recovery, right? Little things like, we often get that phone call saying, and it could be in the middle of Kentucky and they'll be after a tornado, and it'll be like, hey, the gas station's on the generator. They just can't accept credit cards because their satellite dish is blown off or whatever that is. So for us to go out again, it checks the box, right? Because it benefits the whole community. So all we have to do is take a Starlink or some sort of connectivity out there, reconnect their point of sale system, and now the gas station is open again in town. Most people don't carry cash. That's something, statistically, I don't know what the numbers are, but I will say it's a very small percentage of people actually deal with cash. Credit card is convenient. I have the same emergency cash in my wallet that I've had for years because I normally do everything with a credit card. So, all that to say, that's focus areas for us, whether it's think about a school district. One of the big ones that I always think about it, certainly after the fires in California, but after a hurricane in Louisiana, that you may have a school district that owns 70 buildings and they got five tech people, right? So who assesses those 70 buildings? And those are ways that ITDRC comes in. We have people on that volunteer with us from Dell and Cisco and all these different companies where they're able to come in, do an assessment. We can take that back, and then at least now they have a short list, an action list that they have to do that. So we do, special events, things like the Special Olympics, the World Games, things like that. Again, those are all roles you stand up for event. I mean, there's certainly some events that are coming up this year. Again, communities lean into us, cities, states lean into us because we can provide them with qualified people, even if it's just running the help desk, right? Where, because they may bring in 1,000 police officers from across the state or from multiple states. So, we do things like, manage the radio caches and the help desk for those folks. So again, special event support, temporary events, we do a fair amount of that. Cyber response, that's just the new, golden child, if you will, that we see more and more of these responses, many concurrently. And, nobody is immune to this. It's your typical, we just finished out one at a rural hospital, a rural community hospital, and the entire hospital was on paper and pen because their entire infrastructure had been compromised. So it gets the biggest of the cities. It takes down city services, and especially in this day and time when they encrypt all the data, right? Think about the county that happening to a county, and we've done this in many counties where they no longer had access to death certificates, to birth records, historical stuff that really can't be replaced, if you will, short of whatever. So there are some dangers, some pitfalls of everything being digital in this day and time. But again, we offer these services only to state, local, tribal, and critical infrastructure. So, unfortunately, there's these things are happening by the dozens every single day. We just don't necessarily have the resources to help individuals with that. So looking in, our world, we have about 24,000 serialized assets in our system, hundreds, thousands, if you will, of kits. So we kit things out in different configurations depending on what they're for. We keep them in trucks, we keep them in trailers, we keep them in storage stalls, we keep them in warehouses. Some of our partners, we seed them with partners. So again, we use a warehouse management system, an inventory control system, so we know that these three devices are in that black case, which is sitting on this shelf in this warehouse, and things like that. Again, I didn't realize myself that we would turn into such a logistics operation, but this is the type of accountability that you need to have. We need to have it, not only for us, but for our donors, the people who support our mission, right? Um, I love to, if somebody donates a piece of hardware to us, occasionally I will go grab the life cycle, the history of that, see every place it's checked out to, and send them a thank you note. Hey, this satellite phone really helped us in these 3 places last year or whatever. So again, not going to read the list of equipment, just know that all these types of pieces of equipment are available. Um, yeah, probably not for this one here. So communications, right? We like to say we're not a communications group. There's a radio group in every zip code. It's your amateur radio folks. But we also, have had so many requests over the last 10, 12 years just for communications assets. Your average small town police department has one radio per guy. And then when you have an event and you bring in people from other places, you need to provide them with communications things. So we're very much a lending library. We have our own radio shop where we, maintain radios, we program them, we refurbish them, all the things. And which makes it helpful. Mobile workspace, and this is the show and tell, right? So this is our largest mobile command center. Again, it's about 24, 25 seats. We've run some significant events out of a mobile command center in the middle of nowhere. And so that's, these are the different types of fleet assets we have, just depending on what the need is. So won't really run through all these. Probably the more, I don't know, special ones, if you will, we have a few of these trailers that are equipped just for wildland response, right? They're single axle trailers because we can drag them up goat trails to a spike camp, for example. And inside they have, everything from long range microwave to, to Wi-Fi to Starlinks and those types of things. So each of these are packed in different ways, just depending on what their function is. Same thing with, we have a cyber response trailer. It's got hundreds of laptops in the out of box experience that we call it a UBI experience, which is as if you just went and bought a new computer and it's like, start here, type your name. And so that way, when we go into an agency, community, whatever, that's, currently been hit by ransomware, they have these brand new units out of the box that they can start, and we can stand up a alternate network for them, and they can work on Gmail accounts or whatever they have to do. But plenty of networking equipment and anything to be able to bring them up relatively quickly. One of the post hurricane after actions for us was special populations, right? Durable medical equipment. People would come in, they would be without power for weeks, if you will, and they would come to the fire station every day and they would get an oxygen cylinder. And so, battery is the one thing that everybody needs, right? And so we've invested in, literally thousands of batteries where people can come do the same thing. They can come to one of these trailers, which we stage them, typically after hurricanes at a fire station somewhere. They can come check out a battery and take it home. It'll run a CPAP for 8 hours, right? It'll recharge hearing aids. It'll let them recharge their cell phones, those types of things. So it is more for the special population support. And it has other things on there like, tablets and keyboards with big, bright keys and things like that on it. So again, it is something that that's a special population that you as emergency managers need to account for because those are the people that you're going to spend a whole lot more effort and probably even expense on. So making sure that no matter what you're planning for, you're planning to take care of your special populations. But we have, mobile command centers. I mean, these trucks that we have here, they basically have all the radio interoperability in them. So I can go pretty much anywhere in the country and either take a donor radio from an agency, or we can, cross patch cross patch. If you have a fire department that uses UHF, put them on UHF interop channels, cross patch them to VHF interop channels, and now everybody can talk to each other. So again, it is a pure communications thing. It does have a mobile command center in the back, or I'm sorry, it has a meeting area in the back as a type 2. If you've not gotten into the NIMS typing, every resource in the National Incident Management System has a type rating, if you will. So when you're talking about mobile command centers, there's 4 of them. There's a Type 1 is the largest and the most comprehensive. Type 4 is the smallest with the least amount of capabilities. And what that does is when you're ordering a resource, if your department or your agency doesn't have a resource, um, you can put a resource request in and say, I need a type 2 because I need a fax machine and I need 5 phones and 6 seats and radios that will talk statewide, not just locally, right? If all you need is a type 4 because you're doing a small thing, it's a 2 county deal or whatever, then you request a type 4. But that way you don't have to give somebody a laundry list of all the things you need in a communications vehicle. So everything's that way. Generators are that way, dump trucks are that way, fire trucks are that way. Everything is typed, if you will. So if you're not familiar with the NIMS typing, put that on your list. Um, we have also a lot of partner branded assets, right? We own this trailer. It's a $500,000 trailer. It is a mobile command center slash mobile classroom. AT&T happens to be the sponsor of it right now. They are the ones that funded it. The grant funded it. And so we take this to events to represent AT&T. Same breath, we also take this to disasters, set it up. And so there are, 16 workstations inside this trailer. Same thing with, HP, for example. So we have a number of things. Again, we own the assets. We manage them, we staff them, we do everything. It just happens to be, partner branded, and that's as a nonprofit, right? That's how we keep the lights on and keep gas in the tank. Same thing with Walmart, right? We do, charging stations and Wi-Fi for Walmarts, for example. We have 10 of these trailers that are staged around the country. So if you ever have a disaster in your community or a tornado goes through an area, we may roll 3 to 5, 6 of these, whatever that is, just to make sure that their charging's there. So I mentioned the UASI map, and if you're not familiar with UASI, that's the Urban Area Security Initiative, right? So this is Homeland Security has identified 64 territories in the United States which are at high risk for either terrorism or um, high impact if something happens. There are 10 tier one UASI territories, and they're the things you would expect: the New York City, the Chicago, the Dallas, the LA, San Francisco, and whatnot. But then there are the tier twos, right? And that's the Salt Lake cities, and that's the Oklahoma City or the Tulsa, Oklahoma. There's still big population centers, but not necessarily quite the targets, if you will, of a Chicago or a Detroit. So organizationally, ITDRC's goal is to have resources within 5 hours or 300 miles of all 64 UASI territories. Now, fortunately, a lot of these can double up, right? Dallas takes care of Oklahoma City. Dallas takes care of Austin. So in a lot of cases, we have, the benefit of being able to cover multiple UASIs. But this is what determines where we locate our equipment. We surge additional equipment depending on the time of the year. For example, we every year fire season we surge more trailers to the West Coast, right? We keep an extra fire trailer in Oregon, in addition to our regional response trailer that lives in Oregon anyway. So same thing with hurricane season, right? We'll pre-stage our assets in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, in addition to the ones we already have in Florida, Alabama, and whatnot. So anyway, for us, it is how do we get closer to how to be better prepared, shorter response time, and those types of things. So that's really what the UASI means to us. If you're in this emergency management field, you'll hear there are UASI grants. So every year, the federal government carves off grants just for the UASI territories. The tier 10, the tier ones, the top 10, they get a guaranteed grant every year to sustain their program. But for the tier twos, it's somewhat of a competitive process as far as, the grant funding they may get. So a little bit deeper dive into, our people, right? I told you our people come from all over the tech sector. They have day jobs. They support all your favorite things. And but they bring their skill sets to us. And oftentimes we get requests from the government. Last year we had the July 4th flooding in Central Texas, right? And, they said we need 2 GIS technicians that can help us do the mapping, keep up with the search and rescue documentation. So we put two people in there, right? So earthquake in Puerto Rico, and they're like, hey, we need somebody to help us manage the bed counts to understand how many available beds there are in the shelters and things like that. So again, we have from, technical people, super technical people all the way down to, just ancillary roles, right? And I think I talk about that a little bit. We have our own logistics support team, right? When ITDRC goes into a community, we don't want to be a burden on that, right? So we have the ability to, bill it ourselves, to cook our own meals, to refuel. Our folks manage our fuel, our fleet, our rentals, all the things that we need, our transportation. And so our goal again is not to be a drain on the community, but it is to be self-sufficient. And then behind every response, we have a remote response team, and we always have a remote response team. You may call it a watch team or whatever, but um, we always have people who are supporting the bigger machine. So, whenever we get a request, I mean, chances are, well, normally we are watching, right? We're watching for an event to pop somewhere. Anybody in our organization, we have what we call an ESR, an emerging situation report. Anybody in our organization can submit one of those. So if there's a gas explosion in downtown Beloit, Kansas or something, I mean, anybody can open that up and then we'll watch it. Um, if it turns into an event, then we'll turn it into an ISR, an initial situation report, right? And then we'll start doing the research around it. We'll start doing our outreach to our partners and things like that to try to figure out if we're going, did we get any requests? If we got requests, are we anticipating just responding to that request, or are expecting to do more work inside that community? So those are all things that our remote response team and our local leadership are constantly monitoring. So we have a mobilization team, right? So I mean, they are the ones that take care of the flights, the hotel rooms, the rental cars, pretty much the everything as far as getting our teams moving and tracking, right? Time tracking, accountability is a big thing. So, people have to be deployed. They get a formal deployment notification. They have to, check home, all the things, right? We want accountability for that. Project management, same thing. We take on blue sky events for like long-term recovery folks. And so, we have project managers that just work around, excuse me, so our blue sky events, but certainly when we're in the middle of a gray sky event, our remote response team, the PMs, actually help us do things. So, we're constantly monitoring when we install a network somewhere. It gets a score, right? Is this a fire station? Is this a police dispatch center? Or is this just a um, uh, point of distribution that every day they're going to shut the generator off at 6 o'clock and our equipment is going to go down, but they're going to start it up tomorrow morning at 7. So depending on, what the function of that site is, depends on what it is. But if it is a public safety site, if it is a hospital that we have equipment in and that goes up, it will wake somebody up to say, we need to, check on them. We need to, respond, whatever we need to do. Same thing with a remote help desk. Again, we have, typically between 1,000 and 1,500 sites that are open at all times. And so, those folks can call in and say, hey, I need, help doing something or, with equipment, and, we'll take care of that. So probably not to go through the rest of these, but, the typical HR thing, right, is, we have credentials to take care of. We've got, annual background checks that expire. There's, continuing education, training, all the things that have to be done. Of course, that has to be recorded as well. And so our HR team is, typically watching the volunteers, letting them know that, hey, your badge expires in 30 days. And if they've done nothing, then they get another notification in 15 days. Again, these are all things that we use tools for to help us, stay on top of it, because, managing the certifications for that many people is really difficult. So, um, one of the other things I think that, probably the funnest part of what we do, or some of the fun is, what we're doing in the lab, right? So we're constantly innovating. We're talking to our partners in the field, the fire service, the search and rescue teams, those people trying to understand what their needs are, where they're having issues. And so consequently, we'll either develop a solution or we may just add a solution. So, pass point cellular offload, what does that mean? Well, we get out into the middle of the forest in Oregon or Washington, right? There's no cell towers out there. So everybody's carrying bricks around. I could put Wi-Fi in and then they could all, try and join my Wi-Fi. Or I could just turn on pass point. And a pass point basically your cell phone thinks that it sees a cellular tower, and it happens to be over Wi-Fi. So, we're able to. There's three carriers. Verizon is currently in the final stages of testing that, but T-Mobile, AT&T, AT&T FirstNet, our all of our trailers, all of our access points broadcast a pass point network, and so those devices, your cell phones, unless you've explicitly turned it off, will automatically connect to our network. So it's just as if you had, we're standing underneath a cell tower. Halo mesh connectivity. What does that mean? San Bernardino search and rescue team came to us and said, "We got a lot of caves. We go deep into caves. We don't have connectivity deep into the caves." And so traditional 2.4 gig, 5 gig Wi-Fi doesn't work for them in there. And so, we put together wireless networks that operate in a totally different spectrum, right? To do that. So again, we're looking for people. We actually even 3D printed the boxes, right? We put it together from a component level to create these cases, and they can go drop these along the way in a cave or somewhere underground. But the long and the short, they'll have connectivity much deeper in different signal propagation, everything to be able to keep them connected. So we do a lot around, private LTE, and I say do a lot. For us, you take your typical access point, whether it's your home access point, whether it's an access point in the college or whatever, and it's a very low power thing, right? It's made to connect, within a 40-foot area, give or take. Um, when we switch over and we start doing this over LTE, and we start doing this over cellular, then now all of a sudden we can have 50-watt things that go for football fields, right? 3 football fields that we can cover off of a single um, cellular access point, as opposed to just a small consumer one or a small one that's inside of um, a building or a house, whatever that is. So again, how does that help us? Well, that way people have the ability to roam an entire fire camp of 75 acres, right? It's no longer are we running fiber drops or Ethernet drops, which we have a 300-foot maximum with Ethernet. So we're able to get better connectivity out of that. We're able to punch through some of these tents, the yurts that they have. Some of them are foil lined, for example, and you're just not punching Wi-Fi through those. So the long and the short, again, people bring us problems, we solve for them. Airfield communications, again, some other thing, drone incursion monitoring. That's the big thing, right? If there's drones that are flying, fire helicopters can't fly. So obviously we, have the develop some pieces that we can put out there that'll tell us when a drone's flying, show us where the operator's at, where the drone's at. Law enforcement can act on that and go, remedy that. So I'm not going to bore you too much with that, but those are the things that happen. So what I believe you are here to hear today was a little bit about how to use technology, in your roles. And I do want to say that I'm an old guy, right? And to me, AI was not the first thing I grabbed for. In fact, if anything, I have resisted AI for a number of reasons, and mainly for security reasons, right? I mean, I think it's, my personal opinion, right? It's perfectly okay to ask AI, how do I wire a fan, a ceiling fan, right? And let it give you a step by step. But I think to take, your entire um, response playbook and dump it into, to start training models. There's some things that I don't necessarily want phone numbers. There's some things you just don't want to get out, right? So I think, understanding AI, and I had the privilege last week. I'm not even sure to tell, but last week we had a dignitary, right, who's on furlough from the federal government, came and spent a week with us, and this is somebody that's been working with our organization for since 2012, since Hurricane Sandy in 2012, and the whole week was, getting educated about AI and how AI helps in emergency management, right? It's not your typical AI that you see, but I mean, these things can be on-prem, right? These are things that can you put inside your offices. They don't require, gigawatts to run. They're smaller computers, but the whole, I think the trend, the model is going to be where an emergency management agency can basically train it with all its local models, with all the response playbooks that you have, with all the floor plans, with all the MSDS data, or all of your hazardous information for your community can all go into that, and they can start spitting out predictive modeling for you, right? Because I mean, let's be honest. I came from the fire. I spent 24 years in the fire service, and to me, it does make a difference what's inside that building, right? If it's if it's a building that's got, if it's an empty building that's got, some old mannequins in it, that's a totally different fire load than if it's got textiles that are stacked to the ceiling, right? It's going to take a whole lot more water, a whole lot more resources to put a textile fire out than it is going to be an empty warehouse. So again, these are all things that you can train you can use AI to make response plans for you. But I think what the common things everybody sees is the weather forecasting, right? Why is that important? Well, weather alerts. I mean, you need to do your warnings. I know that the Weather Service is a great partner to emergency management. Each of them, each of the offices has a communications channel open between, their storm spotters, between the emergency management folks, and you generally get, I mean, I've had emergency managers tell me that the weather service called me at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, told me at 7 o'clock tonight this river was going to overtop somewhere, right? And that wasn't a broadcast that was on the 10 o'clock news, right? This is something that the weather service, they really, really involved with emergency management. So my point being is you're ultimately responsible, excuse me, for alerting your people, and whether that's your internal teams or whatever. So again, that stuff's out there. Radar mapping, right? For the tornado boxes, I've got a couple of examples. But damage assessment, I mean, who uses technology for damage assessment? Hopefully everybody. It didn't used to be that way, right? It used to be that you called the Red Cross, and the Red Cross would do windshield assessments. And they would just drive up and down the streets and say, major, minor damage not affected, or major, minor destroyed or not affected. And that was your windshield assessments. And then later on, then the city or the county or whoever the political subdivision is would go do a deeper dive. But that information is more available now than it ever has been. And I'm not here to endorse any products, period, and I'm not. But I would say do your homework. There's plenty of free data on the web, not stuff that you have to worry about, infecting your computers or anything like that. Um, but there are tools that are out there. There are companies out there that will, allow you to use their tools for free. We have access to tools that have totally changed the way we do disaster response. I'll show you in a minute. Um, Automate your open source information gathering. There is so much data that's out there that you can't be everywhere. If you're in a small shop, you're a one or two person shop, you don't have time to be scrubbing Twitter or Facebook or whatever, to try to figure out if the nursing home has been evacuated or whatever. If you've never worked in this industry, you're going to find out just how few cycles you have when there is a real event. So use the technology, let the technology help you, leverage the open data sets, right? There's if you want, there's open data sets that'll tell you where every hospital in America is. They will tell you where every fire station in America is. This is all stuff that you can get at the push of a button, as opposed to you going and making a spreadsheet or putting pins on a map or whatever that is. So you learn to use AI again as a force multiplier for you. So when I talk about, your typical radar warning, right? The red box in the middle means it's a tornado warning, right? The other ones are typically severe thunderstorm warnings or whatever that is. But what happened after that? I think that's kind of where it all ends, right? You can see this on 6 o'clock news where the red box was, but what happened out of that? And that's something you're either going to have to drive or you're going to have to guess or whatever that is. But again, there are tools out there now that will tell you this was the exact track of an EF1 tornado, right? Um, I out of respect for the donor of this product, I don't show you the other maps that we get out of it, but I could tell you, I could drill into, if you can see where my mouse is, right? I could drill in here and tell you exactly how many homes are there. And so, in anything that's along this road, right? This happens to be an airport, by the way. This is a tornado, I think, last week up in Michigan. So, but anyway, things like this help us because if you've ever watched the nightly news, right, and when you see all the major networks are standing in front of the same school that's got missing a wall or the same school bus that's turned over, you pretty much know that there wasn't a lot to it. But their goal is to sensationalize it, right? To me, by using your tools to figure that out, if you're an emergency manager in this community, all you have to do is look at this track and figure out exactly where you need to drive to, where you need to concentrate your efforts on. Now, when talk about using your open source tools, right? This is a dashboard that we use internally. And we have the ability to say if a tornado hit, city X or whatever that is, we can put that zip code in, we can put the city name in, we can put multiples in, right? But this is a typical readout, if you will, from that. So if there happened to be, 29.7 million people in this area, and this is an area that we've defined just based on our map, right? It'll tell us the social vulnerability index score, right? How many hospitals in this particular one, which is a big test piece, right? But there are 804 hospitals there. Um, so, I mean, it breaks down the people, it breaks down the population, talks about how many people under 17, how many people above 65, how many households have no vehicles based on publicly available census data, right? Again, you can see risk scores, all the things that go along with this. So, I think my point to you is this is once upon a time, uh, not even a year ago, 2 years ago, right? You didn't have an easy way to put your hands on this data. OpenFEMA's been around for a long time, but they didn't have the AI tools that could say, give me a daily report every morning at 8 o'clock of everything that happened in the state of so and so or the county of so and so. And you can get a report delivered to your inbox, customized for you, right? Based on that. So there's so much you can do with AI. Again, I'm an old guy, I'm still learning it, but I want that to be your takeaway as an academic. So with that, I'm going to shut my mouth and I want to hear your questions.
Thank you for this presentation. This was very insightful and practical. So we welcome questions in the chat, and I see the question whether the presentation will be available. We are recording this meeting, so I know, Daisy, that we will be posting this video on our YouTube channel, so you will be able to access that. Thanks for that question. And please welcome comments, questions. You can unmute yourself or ask it in the chat. And maybe while we're waiting for questions to come in, I'll kick us off. You talked a lot about different technologies and how they assist at different stages of disaster response and disaster recovery. Could you maybe share as an example on when things went wrong, how you planned them to go, and how you address that, especially with technology? Yes, as you also mentioned cyber, which could be one of the factors. So I'm curious to hear maybe some of the stories or examples that you had in your long career in this field.
Well, I will tell you, it feels like something goes wrong on every event. Now, when I say wrong, it may just not have gone to plan, or it may not have gone how we had envisioned it to be. I think the most successful people in response and emergency management are those that don't dwell on it and pick up and carry on, right? So I will tell you that I know that we've been to cyber responses, for example, as where um, people deviated from the plan, right? And so when you spend time, so let's just say that 1,500 computers were infected with ransomware, right? And um, one of the first things to do is isolate everything, right? Get it off the network, all stop a lot of the things. But then you have the people who will come in and then they will connect other machines to the network, and it kind of sets you back where, from where you started from. So I think, that's I want to say fool me once, right? But so then we learned, right? We learned, let's not, when we rebuild, we don't rebuild in the same environment. We rebuild in another environment. And then it's, we make it as sterile as we can. So as an example, some places would pull every single network cable out of every computer plugged into the wall. They would shut down every switch port electronically on the switches in the closet, and they had to go through a process to be able to turn those back on. Usually, it starts with the most important function or people. And from there, then they start adding the other things. So, as an example, I think I told you we just did something at a hospital. The most important to them were the 9 admitting stations, right? Because that's the entry point into the hospital. That's where they get all your information. They validate your insurance, all of the things. So I would say lessons learned from things like that, help us figure out how to be better for the next time. So do not be afraid to, there's a saying, what fail early, fail fast, fail often, I've heard. But that's the thing. You want to fail early into the process, right? So you can get it right and then continue on. You want to fail late into the process. That's a bad thing to do. Almost every hurricane that we respond to, every wildfire, every flood, every, tornado or whatever, there are always things that don't go to plan. And again, I mean, I guess I'm struggling right now to tell you, because to me, I don't look at them. I look at them as situations, not really problems, but situations, if you will, that we just need to go around. So if there are other questions, I'll entertain those. And if not, I'll try to come back with an example of where I might have fallen flat on my face.
Thank you, Joe. I think we're still waiting for folks to share their questions, so I'll usurp my role as moderator and just ask you another one. I was curious to pick up on the last piece of your presentation about ethics, yes, and especially with the emergency management and AI and where we're heading in that direction. So, like, if you can expand maybe on some like ethical challenges that you've experienced in using technology in this field, and how did you or your team navigate these dilemmas and these challenges?
I think with everyone, everybody has a different motivation for being there, right? And, so I think for us, one of the things, because we have so many people in our organization, we do have, they all are required to sign a code of conduct, right? And around our ethics. And it's basically, what happens in the field stays in the field kind of thing. So I think for number one for us, it is, protect the confidentiality of the people that we're serving. We do come into contact with information that's certainly not publicly available. There are a number. I will tell you this. There are I 40, 50%, I don't know, somewhere in there, there's a lot of work that ITDRC does that we'll never say a word about because we didn't have permission to talk about it. So there are cyber events that have taken place right under your nose that were never disclosed publicly and things like that. So I think for us, confidentiality, right? We are looking for the top shelf people. We're looking for the trustworthy people who are not going to share information they shouldn't. We don't allow people to post pictures of personally identifiable information. So if you go look at ITDRC's website, chances are you will see the back of somebody's head. We don't show survivors' faces on purpose. Now, there are some times where they will allow us to, and there are sometimes we ask for permission to. But for the most part, it is about, I think ethics I think we could have a whole day just on the ethics of treating people right. But I think for us, again, I'm not aware of any. I think we've had people that we had a person one time that posted a picture, and in the back of the picture, written on the wall in the command center was a password. And so things like that, right? Now, probably 99% of the people who were saw even could see the password had no clue what the password went to. But just the point being is, right, and just be conscientious of that. If you've ever, watched TV when they're in the National Response Coordination Center, the NRCC, everybody's desks are clean. So always do make sure that, TV cameras are looking for that kind of stuff. So absolutely, I don't know if I answered your question, Dr. Hoban, but um, yeah, ethics are one of the things that's like super high on our, priority list here.
Thanks for sharing the insights. And again, I think the examples from the field are always so valuable for students and the practitioners also who join us here. And again, we have a couple more minutes, so if anyone has a question, please feel free to jump in. And again, I think one question I want to make sure I ask is, we teach future people, yes, who will be in this field. And for faculty and for students, yes, what would be your advice as they are getting into the field on how, broadly, but also on how to approach technology and application of technology, or what skills they need to develop as they are still currently in the school, either in undergraduate or graduate programs?
Yeah, I mean, tech is the future, right? I mean, people like me are retiring out, and the legacy people, the older folks who knew radio waves and things like that, right? I mean, the new breed of emergency manager is people like me, and not me particularly, but people from my era, they had the school of hard knocks. They had all the field experience, very little, they don't have masters in disaster, right? Now we're seeing, and I say now over the last 5, 10 years, we're seeing just a whole new group of EMs that are coming out, and they do have that masters in disaster. What they don't have is that field experience that, they're going to get eventually. But once upon before COVID, dare I say, 95% of emergency managers. I went through a 24-year career in the fire service as a deputy emergency manager and never really had a significant event. Right? We had a airplane crash. I mean, we've had there were a number of significant events. We have a tornado came through a part of town and whatever, but until you've had a year-long recovery,
Mm.
I think that's the biggest thing is, right? Two things I knew as a fireman, right? Number one was that I could pick up the microphone and call for anything I wanted and it would show up. The second thing I knew is that tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock there was going to be a guy in a fresh uniform come and send me home. And that was the two things that I knew. Emergency management is completely different, in that you own this event from cradle to grave. And so, you've heard that all disasters are local. Not everybody understands that or comprehends that, but I mean, it, you people will leave. The help will come in the first few days, first few weeks, whatever that is, but they're going to go away and you're going to be stuck with rebuilding a community or whatever that is. So I think to maybe sum that up. I mean, technology, the more that you can leverage technology, the better. The more efficient you're going to be, the more aware you're going to be. The fact that you're all sitting on this, in this class tells me that you're furthering your education. So make sure that you understand what tools are out there. You know, salespeople go in and sell tools, right? But not all tools are great and not all tools are equal. So it's like keep an open mind. Don't have a preconceived notion of what your role is going to be in emergency management. It
Mhm.
changes daily.
Thank you so much for the presentation and the insights. And as I mentioned, we'll share this widely with those who are not able to attend. And thanks everyone for joining. I think we're right on time. So, but I'll stay here for a little bit if there are any other questions. Again, thanks, Joe, for joining us and sharing these great insights with us.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.